Card King, here I come. Hello, sports fans, sports collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490 AM.com. Your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program pitcher for the 1961 through 1964 Washington Senators. I welcome in Carl Bouldin. Carl, great to have you on. A pleasure.
Thank you, Brian. My pleasure.
Carl, reading about your sports achievements, many people here may not realize, but besides being known as that major league ball player, you were some collegiate basketball player. Is that right?
Well, I played on the University of Cincinnati and played 2 years with the big O, Oscar Robertson. We got to 2 Final Fours, but got beat by University of California those 2 years. They slowed the ball down on us, and it upset our play. And then the next year, in 1961, I played on the team that won the national championship, beat Ohio State in the final game, 70-65, I think, an overtime game.
And it's
Ohio State had a hell of a year. I'm sorry, the Ohio State had won the year before, and then I don't think they lost a game in '61 until they played us. So it was a real upset. So
and you were also drafted by the NBA, right?
Well, I was 14th from the Royals then. Oscar was playing with them then, and I just thought I had a better chance to make it in baseball if I could get a contract, which I did. And I just saw Bob Uecker died, and sorry to see that. And he was an interesting guy, but he said he had an undistinguished career, and that was me. My career was undistinguished.
Well, I mean, touching back on that Bearcats roster, 58-59, I'm showing that it had 3 future NBA players, including the legendary Oscar Robertson. Now, was Oscar that good in college, Carl?
Oh, yeah. Yep. He did things that you hadn't seen before every day in practice. I loved watching him play. He was a real treasure, and it was so easy for him. But we didn't win with him, but it was not because of him. It's just circumstances, and University of California had a good plan, and it worked. And then that caused us, when Oscar left, that caused Ed Jucker to come in and be coach. George Smith stepped down and became athletic director. And Ed Jucker was a coach, and he decided that we had the kind of team that could slow the game down, and there were no clocks then, and so we didn't have a time limit, and so we held on to the ball until we got a good shot most of the time, especially if we had a lead, and we'd just pass the ball and use the 4 corners and make breaks and try to get open for layups or at least a good shot, and it worked for us.
And Carl, during your college years, you set several pitching records for the school, including an ERA record of 1.41, I believe, which is the top 3 of all time for the school. Now, is that how the Senators heard about you?
There was a scout that followed me in amateur ball and at UC, a guy named Tommy Thompson, that signed me, and he called up and said that Washington has an interest. I talked with the Reds, at the Cincinnati Reds, and they were interested, but they weren't interested in paying any money. He told me that, the scout told me that, here's what you need to do. You need to decide how much money it's going to take you to live each month. If it's $500 or something, then we can talk about that. I said, well, I'm going to sign with Washington probably because they're offering more money. And then I had an invite from Baltimore to come up and try out with them. And I kept throwing that in Washington's face when they were talking, because we didn't have agents then. And so it was just up to me, and I wasn't a great negotiator. But they started off at $12,000, and I just kept putting it off and said, well, I think I'm going up to Baltimore. and try out. And finally, they got up to 20,000. I thought, well, that's not bad for 1961. And so I got $20,000 to sign. They broke it up in 3 years, and I bought a house. So that was my investment at the time.
Now your parents, were they proud? They must have been proud, huh?
Well, my dad wanted me to play basketball and sports from the time I was born. He hung a goal up on the door with a bell on it, and so you shoot, you make it, rang the bell. I don't remember if I made any or not at 2 years of age, but anyway, he also built a basket outside, and I was from a family of 6, and 4 boys. I was the oldest, and we wore that basket out several times, and it caused me to be a decent shooter. And when I was a senior, I got to shoot some, and that was because of that goal. But my dad also, my mom and dad, coming out of some lean years, didn't make me work. They let me play baseball and basketball, and I remember my granddad being down at our house one time, and he said, "Well, I heard him in the other room. He said, I think the boy ought to be working." And probably I should have, but they let me not work, and I appreciate all that for them. And my dad did a lot of things for me, like building that goal and teaching me how to play, and he also showed me how to throw a knuckle curveball. And he just said, try flipping your knuckles and see how that works. I was playing slam ball down at the school with a little box drawn on the wall, and at knuckle curve, nobody could hit it. So from the time I was like 9 years old or so, I was playing slam ball, and then developed that pitch where my hands got a little bigger, and I could make a hard ball drop. So that was my big pitch. It was because I didn't try to overpower anybody, and I wasn't fast, but I had good control, and had 4 pitches: a fastball, slider, a knuckle curve, and a changeup, and those are my 4 pitches. And the curveball nobody could hit, as I say. There was a time when I pitched against the Yankees, and of course that was a big thrill just to do that. I was 22 at the time, I think, and I ended up facing Mantle, and I walked him the first time I faced him, just trying to be too careful. And the next time up, I threw him 2 knuckle curves, and he just looked back at me like, what was that? And then they said he had a blind spot up and in. And so I just wasted a pitch, the next pitch, and then the catcher called for a fastball, and I threw a pitch up and in, and he missed it. I mean, he hit half the air out of the stadium. What a swing. I've never seen anything like that, but a good thing for me is he missed it. So the strikeout Mantle was a big thing. And then I had a friend in Kansas City, and when I visited him, he asked me over for dinner, and so we talked, and he had this big picture on his wall, and it's a guy swinging a bat, hitting a home run, I guess, and I said, who's that picture? He said, it's Roger Maris. And on that picture, I mean, it was big. It was like 4 feet wide and 3 feet tall, and neat picture, and signed by Roger, and it said, to my best friend, Ed, Roger Maris. So I said, oh, you were good friends, huh? He said, oh, yeah. He lives right down the street. And so he would call me every once in a while, ask how it's going, and there was a game where Roger got a home run off of me. Now, that was in 62. He got he set the record in 1961. But in 62, he didn't have that many home runs, but he still had that swing. And when I went in, everybody says, well, don't feel bad. Maris got a couple other home runs. But the story behind that was that he had a count of 2 balls and a strike on him. And so, we're figuring he's going to be looking for a fastball, and catcher called for a changeup. And I threw the changeup, and I had a good changeup. When I let it go, usually I would let it go, and I'd see the ball halfway down, and the hitter had already made his move to hit the ball. But Maris is just waiting back. I thought, oh, this is not good. and he just cracked it off the right field scoreboard in Washington, another home run for him. So a couple of weeks later, my buddy in Kansas City called me up, said, well, I see Rod's got one off of you. I said, yeah. I said, I can't understand it. That pitch was one of the best pitches I ever threw. It was a good changeup. It was low and away. It was sinking, and he was just waiting on it, like he knew it was coming. He said, well, he did know something. I said, what's that? And you never find that out. He said, the third base coach picked up something your catcher did. I said, you got the signals? He said, no. He said, if he wanted a fastball, he'd pop the mitt. When he wanted to change up, he'd hold up both hands to slow you down. Third base coach, I think it was Tony Cuccinello, picked that up and whistled, and Maris just waited for the changeup. He got it, and he hit it good. That's my story about Maris.
Amazing. We're talking with Carl Bouldin, who pitched for the Washington Senators during the 1960s. He's with us on the telephone line. Carl, your major league debut, do you remember it well?
I only remember the first inning. The second inning, I got a couple of runs off of me. But the first game, I pitched against, and these three guys that I pitched against, I had seen them because I had, in my room at home, I had pictures out of Sport Magazine back then. They had a color picture or several in the magazine each month, and I'd cut them out and paste them up on my mom let me paste them up on the walls. And so I had, 100 guys looking down at me that were baseball players in the major leagues. And so I see these guys, and I knew I'd had them on my wall. And so I came in and asked and I got them out 1, 2, 3. And I came in and I asked the pitcher coach, who's that first guy I pitched against? And so he had to chew the back on his mouth. He was a short guy. He said, oh, that was Nellie Fox. So I didn't want to ask him. I'd go and ask somebody else. Who was the second guy, black guy that had gold teeth? And, I'd seen him. Oh, that was Manny Minoso. And then the third guy was Jim Landis. And so I got him on ground outs and pop-ups, and I don't know if I struck anybody out. But then the next inning, they got a couple of runs off of me. And because of that game, there was a coach there, George Case, that told me one time, he said, Carl, and this is early, when I'd only been there a couple of weeks, he said, I like your demeanor. He said, I like, you got good pitches, change-up, curveball, good control, and he says, I think you're going to go far. I just hope things fall into place. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, that's what has to happen in this game. It's like everything else. You have to have a little luck here and there. Which I didn't have luck. I had some bad luck, but anyway, I had some good experiences that I wouldn't trade. But because of that, I did get a start against Baltimore a couple of weeks later, and in that game, a guy came over and introduced himself to me. His name was Whitey Herzog before the game because he knew my friend out in Kansas City too, and so he said, "Well, Ed." I said, yeah, good guy. He said, I just want to wish you luck. And so after the game, next day, I see him. He says, we didn't hit a good ball off of you. He said they all had seeing eyes. The last guy up hit a double off the wall, and that was the only ball that they hit good that I remember. So I thought I deserved better, but that's the way it happened. And so the season ended right after that. Came back the next year, and I was sent out the first 2 years back to Syracuse 1 year, but that was a good experience. I played for Johnny Vandermeer up there, and he helped me try to show me how to throw the ball harder if I wanted, and then played for Toronto the next year. And at Syracuse, I played against Toronto, and George Sparky Anderson played for them, and then I played on the team that he managed the next year, which was Toronto, and he was a funny guy, good guy, and he was a good manager. Of course, went on to coach and manage the Reds and won 2 World Series, and it really was a good baseball man. But there was a case where we lost a doubleheader at Toronto, and in fact, he had said, we've got a bunch of good guys here. He said, if we don't win this league by 10 points, he said, I'm a bad manager. Well, we didn't win. So he talked himself into a corner there. But he had come in, and we lost a doubleheader, and somebody had ordered some hot dogs, and they were sitting on this potbelly stove that was in the clubhouse. And he picks them up and says, "Who's eating all this food? What the hell?" And he grabs the hot dogs and squeezes them and throws them up in the ceiling. And then Jim Bronstadt walks out and he says, "Hey, what happened to that food I got from my parents?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, Jimmy." And he reaches in his pocket, try to get some money and give it to Jim so he could buy some more food for his parents.
I mean, this is fascinating, Carl. You know, you win the NCAA basketball title. 5.5 months later, I believe, you're on the mound pitching for the Senators, facing Mantle, Minoso, etc. I mean, did these guys intimidate you?
No, I knew who they were. Like I said, I didn't know what they could hit or what they couldn't hit was the problem. Like I just heard that Mantle had a blind spot up and in, and that's about all I knew. Most of them, you know. But the catcher would just call what he thought my strength was. You know, I threw a lot of sinkers, and that was my fastball. And so I pitched low and away mostly, and then up and in just to keep them away from the plate. The curveball is my strikeout pitch, and the changeup got to be an important pitch for me. I didn't even know how to throw it, but one of the coaches showed me how to throw that changeup, and it wasn't a circle changeup like they throw now, but it was just, you know, hold the ball a little looser and let it go, have good arm motion, and get it in the right place, low and away usually.
And Carl, during your tenure with the Senators, I believe you played for Mickey Vernon and then Gil Hodges in '64, your last year. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, Vernon and Hodges, good baseball men to play for?
Oh yeah, you know, Vernon liked me, but he thought I needed, you know, some experience somewhere or another. So that's why I was 22, 23 at the time, sent out to Syracuse and Toronto those 2 years. And I had pitched in the Winter League in Venezuela, Caracas, and I was on a team with Pete Rose. So that was an experience. And the best game that I pitched in my professional career was down in Caracas, and it was against a team that was leading the league, and it was a big inner city thing. So a lot of people were there. I mean, they used to get 10,000, 15,000 people at these games in Caracas, and so I was a starting pitcher, and I was pitching against a guy, Darrell Knowles, who was 12-0 at the time for that team, and they had 3 pretty good hitters on there. They had all 3 Alou brothers on that team, Felipe, Jesus, and Matty, and so the game went on, and we ended up winning 3-1. They took Darrell Knowles out, and as he walked into the dugout, one of their fans threw a beer on him, one of their fans, and because they were mad because he gave up 3 runs. And when the game was over, they carried me around the field like I was a bullfighter or something. And so that was an exciting time, but it didn't make any difference. I didn't get much of a chance to start the next year when I got back. That was 1963, and I say Pete was there, and he was the rookie of the year during that year for the Reds. But we got down there, and he says, "Let's go to lunch. You want to go to lunch someplace?" I said, "Yeah. Where?" He said, "Well, there's a open air place down there. Dogs run in and out of it, but they have this thing that they give you a little grill with a steak on it, and it's pretty good." So we get there. He said, "Anybody know how to speak Spanish here?" Yeah, of course I didn't, but he says, "I'll take care of this." I said, "Yeah, right." Excuse me. And so he says, "So here's what we want. We want steak-o, potato, salad-o, and tomato." And they laugh like hell. And that's what we got. We got steak, salad, and potato and tomato. And so that was his experience in ordering Spanish food. But
and you know,
a guy that
Carl,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say a guy that I got to know real well, not real well, but just talked to him in the bullpen was Dick Donovan. and he pitched for the Senators. And in 1961, he led the American League in earned run average. He had a 2.4 ERA, but he was only 10-10. So, I got a good break by being with Washington, and the fact that I got to the big leagues in a hurry. But I didn't get really what I felt like were solid chances. And, so it was good that I got with Washington for that reason. But I wasn't going to win any games because they lost 100 games every year. And a guy that led the league in ERA was only 10-10. So it was frustrating to try to do anything because we weren't that good, honestly. So we were all undistinguished, I guess. There was a funny thing that happened in spring training one time. Chuck Cottier was a guy that was an infielder for Washington, and so he comes over to me this second year I was up, and he says, "Hey, you know that guy in right field?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "What kind of arms do you have?" I said, "He's got a cannon." He said, "Oh, okay." So he goes back and talking with Jim King, who's up next. Well, King goes up and hits a line drive to right field, gets a base hit. He goes rounding the base like he's going to do something. Bang! That ball's right in back of him. So the first baseman tagged him out. King comes in. He says, "Cottier, I'm going to kill you." And the right fielder was Willie Stargell. So they didn't know who he was at that time, but he did have a cannon.
Really? Wow. So, I mean, this is crazy. This is amazing. So now, I have a few minutes left. I want to get to, you mentioned something interesting. Now, your rookie baseball card, 1963, pictures you with 4 players: Steve Balkowski, Newman, Smith for the Dodgers, and Bouldin. Now, you mentioned that we can catch a glimpse of that rookie card on a Netflix series. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. The name of the movie is Fastball, and it's the history of the fastball, and it goes back and talks about all the guys before radar, and even talks about after radar because they changed how they read it. When they first had it, they read the speed at the plate. When the ball got there, they found out that I think when the Reds pitcher that was a fastball pitcher was throwing 100, that threw 105 or whatever he threw, 102 or whatever. Anyway, they found that they were measuring that from when it left his hand. And they said that Nolan Ryan was probably the overall fastest pitcher and that he threw, like 95 most of the time, but 97 once in a while. And he said he would have thrown at 108 at different times had they measured it from the time it left his hand. So that was interesting, but it's a good series or a good film. And one interesting thing was Bob Feller was in there, and they wanted to prove before radar that he threw faster than 80 miles an hour. So they got him out in the street, and he had stopped down in my room down in spring training and asked and wanted to talk about investing. And I told him I got $20,000. He asked me how much I got. I said $20,000. He said, "Well, you'll make big money sometime." So that wasn't enough for him. So then he told me about his pitching and being out, how hard he threw. And he said, so they got this motorcycle rigged up, and he said they had a sheet out there, and he said, "Try to throw it through that hole there." And he said, "I don't know if I can hit the sheet." And the motorcycle went by, and he threw it right through the hole, and he said it was all perfect. And he beat his pitch course was faster than 80 miles an hour, so he beat it. That was the way they timed it in that day. But anyway, I think the radar didn't come in until the mid '70s. So of course it wasn't there when I was there, and I know that the reason Hodges didn't like me pitching was he didn't think I threw hard enough. Well, I didn't know how hard I threw. I mean, I threw hard, and Sid Hudson came up to me, the pitching coach, and said, and I was supposed to start against Minnesota. This is 1964. And I said, he said, "Carl, do you throw every fastball as hard as you can?" And I said, "No." And I didn't get a chance to say anything further. He just turned around and walked off. And then the next day I was traded to the White Sox. And I just decided a long time ago, first of all, in my talks with Dick Donovan, who said he didn't throw that hard, I wanted to go 9 innings, so I knew I couldn't do that if I threw every fastball as hard as I could. That wouldn't go over today. You have to throw 95 miles an hour, or you're not playing. So things would have been different had I been playing today. I had to throw every ball as hard as I could, and nobody tried to tell me that you can either throw the ball harder. It's just, do you throw every fastball as hard as you can? Well, no. I might throw a pitch outside to set the guy up for a hard throw on the inside at the hands. So that was the way I saw it, but they didn't see it that way. So I got traded to the White Sox, and then in 1965, I tore my rotator cuff playing winter ball. I had a locker right next to Roberto Clemente, so I got to meet him, talk to him a little bit. But
oh my gosh.
Hurt my arm, and that was it. I was done after that. Not much market for a sore arm pitcher.
Well, I mean, you weren't a small guy. I mean, I think you measured like 6'2", 180 pounds, and you were a switch hitter who threw right-handed, no?
Yeah, right. I had no hits in the big leagues. I hit 350 for a half year in AAA at Indianapolis, but I was hitting and not pitching well during that time. I did have one complete game against the White Sox. I had a complete game against the White Sox, and that was the only complete game I had. So a record of 3-8. Like I say, it was undistinguished.
And my final question, I appreciate your time. Do you still follow the game? When you retired,
Oh, yeah.
You still followed baseball?
Yes. I love basketball and baseball still, and follow it and follow the grandkids playing basketball, and I love everything about it.
And you ever keep in touch with the Big O?
Yeah, not so much. He moved down to Florida, and I used to see him pretty regularly around town, and I don't see him that much anymore.
Well, listen, I really appreciate this. This was great. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope somebody found it interesting, but it was nice talking with you, Brian.
This is great. I love it. Carl Bouldin, a pitcher for the 1961-64 Washington Senators. Until next week, happy collecting to all.